Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the 2024 College Football Team Autopsy Report. An autopsy report is a document that summarizes the findings of an autopsy, an examination of a body after death. It includes details of the examination, tests, and observations performed, as well as the cause and manner of death. Just like a real autopsy report, the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network College Football Autopsy Report examines a team's body of work after the season has concluded. This report includes a review of the team's season win total and whether they met expectations, key offensive, defensive, and special teams metrics that shaped the season, a deep dive into coaching decisions, including situational play and fourth down aggressiveness, a final season grade, evaluating execution, performance in key moments, and consistency, the final verdict, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and what must be fixed for 2025. With the 2024 season in the rearview mirror, it's time to examine the patient. To present the findings, we have called in our Chief Medical Examiner and Senior Analyst, Kenneth.
And welcome back to the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, folks. This is the 2024 Louisville Cardinal Team Autopsy Report. I'm really excited to get into this patient because there's a lot to uncover with this particular team. So let's go ahead and get underway here. If you're new to the podcast, welcome aboard. Always glad to have new listeners. If you've been with us for a while, thank you for coming back. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, please do us a favor. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Get those notifications to all of the autopsy reports that will be coming out over the summer. If you're listening on your podcast platform, thank you as well. We're going to give you a lot of that information that they're going to be able to see visually. I'm going to give it to you right here, right now. So let's get underway with Louisville because we got a lot to unpack over the next 25 minutes. Let's start there with the season betting win total. Back in June, you could have got the season win total at 8.5. So if you took the over, you came up just a little bit disappointed in Louisville because they did not get you to the betting window with a winning ticket. Now, as for us here at the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, we have what we call a composite win total. It's basically our in-season projection of what that team's season win total should be at the end of the regular season, postseason not included. We actually had Louisville even better at 8.8. I'm pretty sure when I dive into this schedule for Louisville, I'll be able to find out exactly which game that they came up short that would have got you to the pay window. So they missed the expectations from the betting market. They missed our expectation from a composite win total because we thought that this team should have been a non-win team. Let's talk about their strength of schedule and their strength of record. Now, your strength of schedule, basically you control your non-conference. So did you test yourself in the non-conference? And pretty much how was your in-conference schedule set up? With these expanded conferences, you really aren't seeing apple to apples comparison as what we've seen in the past. So you could play in a big time conference and not play the elite teams within your conference, just the way the schedule shakes out. Now, Louisville, their strength of schedule, 506. That was 29th out of 134 teams last year. So they faced a very challenging schedule from a power ranking standpoint for us. Now, their strength of record. Now, this you can't control. Basically, it's how well does your opponents perform during their regular season. Their opponents had a strength of record at .621. That was 13th best out of 134 teams. So their opponents racked up a lot of wins last year, and we're going to dive into that here. Tina, if you can pull up the graphic for me on the monitor, thank you. So let's go through their schedule really quickly, and then we'll talk about their offense. What kind of defenses did this team go up against last year, week in and week out? Looking at their opponent's record, Jacksonville State was 8-4. Georgia Tech was 7-5. Notre Dame and SMU on back-to-back weeks were 11-1. Virginia was 5-7. Miami was 10-2. Boston College 7-5. Clemson was 9-3. Stanford was 3-9. Pitt 7-5. Kentucky was 4-8. So you see that they played really 4 teams that had at least 9 wins or better. So challenging that strength of record, this kind of backs that up. Now, we use a baseline here of 68 because that's how many Power 4 teams that we have when you include the 4 major conferences and Notre Dame. I want to take a look and see how many of those teams were inside of that top 68. So Georgia Tech had the 15th best defense. So this is what Louisville's offense went up against as far as defensive power rankings go. Georgia Tech was 15th. Notre Dame was 9th. SMU was 34th. Virginia was 65th. Miami was 47th. Boston College was 55th. Clemson was 35th. Pitt was 56th. And then Kentucky was 13th. So none of their opponents were inside of that top 68. And I said that I would find a game that really kind of tilted the scale for Louisville as far as going over that projection win total and not look no further than towards the end of the season when they lost that game to Stanford 38-35. You win that game, you go over that 8.5 win total, and you beat our composite win total by going over 9 wins in the regular season. Like I said, would not take long to figure that out. Now, if you talk about their opponent's defensive power ranking on an average standpoint, so what would they have gone up against when you average out their opponents week in and week out? You're talking about the 48th power ranked team week in and week out. So about a team that would have finished somewhere around 8-4, possibly even 7-5, somewhere in that area. That's kind of what they were going up against week in and week out. Let's take a look at the key takeaway from an overall betting standpoint before we get into this team's offensive metrics here. Key takeaway for me has got to be Louisville underperformed as they failed to meet both the betting season win total as well as our composite win total, largely due to some inconsistencies in execution, struggled in some high leverage situations. We'll be talking about that later on in the pod as well. Okay, let's get to the offense. If I had to sum up this offense in a very bullet point statement, high scoring, strong aerial attack. And when you talk about a head coach in Jeff Brom, and I usually do this at the top of the top of the show in the intro, but here's his record as a head coach, 11 years in now. He's 85-52, a win percentage of 620. Now, at Western Kentucky, absolutely lit it up there. 30 wins and 10 losses in 3 years there. He gets elevated to the Purdue job, spends 6 years at Purdue, and was barely 2 games over 500, 36 wins, 34 losses. But now coming back home to Louisville, because Brom was a quarterback with the Cardinal there, he's 19-8 in his 2 seasons as the head man there. So he has absolutely been cooking with hot grease since he's been back at his alma mater. And great job by coach in getting that done. I said high scoring, strong aerial attack for the Cardinal. Let's give you the NCAA averages. They're Louisville's accounting stats, if you will, and then when we adjust them for opponents. So the NCAA average, last year, average offense scored about 28 points per game. About 227 yards passing, 160 yards rushing, 387 yards of total offense per game. The Cardinal, their raw counting numbers, 36.6 points per game. When we adjust that for opponent, it's down just by a little over 2.5 points, down to 34 points per game. Still an extremely electric offense there. Their passing yardage goes like this: 272 yards passing per game. When we adjust for opponent, that increases by 15 yards up to 287. Their ground game, 183 yards per game on the ground. When we adjust for opponent, ticks down to about 170 yards per game. Total offense, 456 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, ticks up just a little bit to 457. So we feel like this team, we had a really good indicator on how well they were doing. As far as some of the other key numbers we look at, what was your drives ending with either a touchdown or a field goal? The average team last year was about 40% of their drives. Louisville, 54.3%. This team was finding a way to put up points, and that's how you score over 34 points per game. Now, drives ending with a touchdown. This is something that we pay a little bit more focus to, and that number for the average team last year, about 28%. The Cardinals were at 40%. So not only were they scoring, they were scoring touchdowns. Phenomenal job there. Third down conversion. Average team about 39%. Louisville was at 41% conversion on third downs. Excellent work there. Average team last year gave up about 23.5 sacks on the season. Louisville did a fantastic job of protecting their quarterback. Only allowed 13 sacks there in the regular season. Also did a great job of taking care of the ball. Only 11 turnovers there. Excellent. Now, here at the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, we have our 3 E's. How effective, explosive, and efficient is your offense? We'll talk about the defense here in just a moment. Out of 134 teams, this was the 26th most effective offense in college football last year. They were the 13th most explosive team in college football. And as far as efficiency, they were the 11th best offense in college football last year. This team finished up as our 12th best offense in college football. Their strengths, we talked about an explosive passing game, also a balanced rushing attack as well, and elite efficiency, as I mentioned. Now, let's talk about their defense here. And if you'll pull up the graphic for me, Tina, thanks. All right. Now, once again, we're going to stick with that baseline of 68. How many of their opponents' offenses were inside of that top 68 so we can really kind of judge this Louisville Cardinal defense? Jacksonville State was 50th. Georgia Tech was 61st. Notre Dame was 4th. SMU was 10th. Miami, number 1 scoring offense in college football for us last year. Boston College, 54th. Clemson, 13th. And then finally, Pitt was 65th. So 8 of their opponents were inside of that top 68. On an average week in and week out number, you're talking about a team that would have been ranked 46. So you're talking about a team that would have probably been in that 7-5 mark on the regular season from that side of the ball. If I had to bullet point this defense, I would say it was solid but lacked big play prevention. I think I'm going to give you some numbers here that's going to bear that out. So let's start there with their points per game allowed. This defense allowed 23.3 points per game. When we adjust for opponent, ticks down to 20.6, so an improvement of almost a field goal per game there when we adjust for opponent. Passing yards per game, 225 yards passing per game. When we adjust that for opponent, goes down to about 218, so about a 7-yard improvement there. Their rushing defense, 134 yards per game. When we adjust for opponent, small regression, goes to 139, so about a 4-yard differential there. Total offense per game allowed, 360 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, goes down to about 357. So that's about 10 to 12 yards per game in total offense, better than what the average team was last year. Now, their opponents' drives ending with a score, touchdown or field goal, 34% of the time. So much improved on the NCAA average there. Their opponents' drives ending in a touchdown, let's call it 24%. That's still almost 4 percentage points better than what the average was. In their opponent's conversion on third down, only 33% on third down. So this team had some really good metrics there on third down. This team was about the average as for sacks. They sacked their opponent's quarterback 22 times, just about 1.5 sack off of what the average was last year. Their opponents found a lot of success going for it on fourth down. 31 attempts, 20 conversions. Their opponents were converting on fourth down about 65% of the time. Did do a decent job of forcing turnovers, forced 16 turnovers. Let's talk about their 3 defensive E's here. How effective was your defense? How was your defense in not giving up explosive plays and from an efficiency standpoint? This was the 47th most effective defense in college football last year. 57th as far as allowing explosive plays, so did give up a lot of explosive plays. And as far as efficiency goes, 43rd in efficiency. This was our 49th overall defense in college football last year. Let's take a look at the coaching and special teams here, because we find there's always some good information as far as this goes. You're talking about a special team unit that was below average in the kicking game. 16 out of 23 made field goal attempts. That's less than 70%. The average team last year was converting about 76%. Did knock down all of their extra points. And their punting left a lot to be desired there. Only 39.2 yards per punt, 127th out of 134 teams. As far as one game score, this team was 2-4 last year. Looking at their 2 wins, I'm looking at the game against Boston College and the game against Virginia. So not against the better competition, and their 1-score losses. Pretty much all of their quality opponents they lost to, as far as in that 1-score number there. Okay, so we're looking at a team with a quality versus quality opponents, 3-3. Did a good job as far as the penalty go. Only 5.7 penalties per game. As far as this coach being aggressive going for it on fourth downs, 53rd out of 144 qualifying coaches last year. With a conversion rate of 40%, only 8 for 20 going for it on fourth down. not a good conversion rate. So them not being overly aggressive, it makes sense when you look at those numbers. Now let's take a look at how did this team perform in their wins from an offensive standpoint. How did they perform in their losses? Then we'll go to the defense. Okay, so in the 8 games that Louisville won last year, this team was scoring about 38 and a half points per game, attempting only 29 pass attempts per game for 258 yards, 8.8 yards per attempt, 13.6 yards per completion. They were running the ball extremely well. So this team was balanced when they won. 35 rushing attempts per game, over 209 yards of rushing offense, 6 yards per rushing attempt. This team was converting on third downs at a 42.5% clip, only committed 5 turnovers in those 8 wins. Now, in their losses, this team was still averaging, let's call it about 33 points per game. They were throwing the ball a lot more, up to 42 passing attempts per game, 300 passing yards per game, but that yards per attempt dips down to 7.2. Same can be said with the yards per completion. That dips down to 11.7. Only running the ball 29 times per game, but it's the yardage that goes way down. 133 yards per game on the ground, 4.6 yards per rushing attempt. This team on third downs in those losses, about 35% conversion rate, and they had 6 turnovers. So difference is in their wins, about 6 more points, 43 yards fewer in passing, but that's offset by almost 75 additional rushing yards. So they were controlling the ball game better and not basically being pretty much one-dimensional there. Now, let's take a look at their defense, because I think the defense is where the lapses were as far as in their wins and losses. In their wins, that defense was only allowing 15.5 points per game, 200 yards passing on 34 passing attempts by their opponents, 5.9 yards per attempt, 10.4 yards per pass completion. Their opponents were running the ball about 36 times per game for 127 yards, only 3.6 yards per rushing attempt. Their opponents were converting on third downs in those wins only 34% of the time, and they forced 12 turnovers. In those 4 losses, defense was giving up almost 39 points per game. Passing yardage goes way up. They were giving up 270 yards passing per game on 29 attempts. So fewer attempts, but much bigger data from their opponents in the passing game. 9.4 yards per passing attempt, 13 yards per completion. Their opponents, same amount of attempts, about 36 rushing attempts, 152 yards per game rushing allowed, 4.3 yards per carry. So it was really, they were getting ripped open in the secondary when they lost. Their opponents were converting about, let's call it 40% on third downs, only forced 4 turnovers in those 4 losses. So when this team lost, they were giving up almost 23 more points per game, almost 75 yards more in passing yards, also another 25 additional yards. So when this team lost, they were giving up basically another 100 yards to their opponents in total offense. So what went wrong for the Cardinal in 2025? I would say the run defense struggled in some key games. This team was inconsistent from an offensive standpoint on third and fourth downs, and special teams, below average punting and field goal kicking unit there. So there's a lot of things that this team needed to improve on in 2024. Let's take a look at the quarterback, who is now going to be in the NFL draft, and that's Tyler Show. 12 games last year, 244 completions, 389 attempts, completing almost 63% of his passes for almost 3,200 yards passing, 23 touchdowns to just 6 INTs. 5.9% of his passing attempts went for touchdowns. Only 1.5% were interceptions. So Tyler did a great job of taking care of the ball. Now, his yards per attempt, 8.2. Telling me that you're not pushing the ball down the field enough. You want to see that number over 8.5, really more closer to 8.7 there if you're really trying to be explosive in the passing game. Just looking to see if they had any standout wide receivers. Not really. Ja'Cory Brooks led the team in receptions, 61 receptions. Did go over 1,000 yards, did have 9 touchdowns, averaged about 84 yards per game receiving. So who's going to step in and be the starting quarterback for the Cardinal next year? We're looking at Harrison Bailey right now. We'll see if that shakes out after the spring workouts go, but he did get some limited action last year, appeared in 5 ball games. Nothing significant to report on that. So let's get to the Cardinal final grade, and then we'll get to the final verdict. The Louisville Cardinal will receive a solid B. Reason for that, this team was explosive on the offensive side of the ball, ranked 11th in the FBS. Balanced offense attack with a strong running game. Did win 3 out of their 6 quality games, needed to get better in that. Weaknesses, this team struggled in close game situations, defensive issues in key moments. Louisville Cardinals, the final verdict, was a top 25 team, but inconsistencies in critical moments and struggles in high leverage situations kept this team from breaking into the college football playoff contention. So let's talk about the 3 things that this team absolutely has to improve on in 2025. 1, you got to improve the secondary. In those 4 losses, we talked about it, giving up 274 yards per game through the air. Got to improve that. The second thing is they got to get better execution in those 1-score games. That comes down to coaching and execution. If you can improve in those 2 areas, you can absolutely improve on that record in both 1-score games as well as going up against quality opponents. And then third key is they must address the special teams deficiencies from both the punting game as well as the field goal kicking game. If the Louisville Cardinal can improve in these 3 areas, this team can be a serious Atlantic Coast Conference title contender and push for a college football playoff berth in 2025.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things college football. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more content. And make sure to visit our website at CrunchTimeSportsAdvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for our next patient on the 2024 College Football Autopsy Report.